The day they told me I wasn't ready, that's the day they signed their own destruction warrant. I remember staring at the rain-streaked window, the city lights blurring into a watercolor mess of disappointment and fury. He stood there smug, the words still ringing in my ears. Adequate, Ella, just adequate. They thought that single word would crush me, would make me accept my place. But all it did was light a fire, a slow-burning inferno fueled by years of unseen labor and unacknowledged dedication. If you would give anything to protect your family, subscribe now and join a community where loyalty is everything. For 5 years, I poured my soul into that company. 5 years of early mornings, late nights, and missed birthdays, all sacrificed at the altar of professional success. I mastered every program, anticipated every problem, and quietly fixed every crisis before it even registered on their radar. I practically ran the department, creating detailed daily guides that everyone relied on, yet my contributions were consistently minimized, my ambitions casually dismissed. My boss, Mr. Thompson, a man whose incompetence was only surpassed by his arrogance, always took credit for my ideas, parading them as his own brilliant strategies during board meetings. The raise I deserved never materialized. The promotion I earned was perpetually just out of reach. And the reason? According to Thompson, I lacked leadership potential and wasn't management material. He needed someone more dynamic, someone who could take charge. What he really wanted was someone who wouldn't outshine him, someone who wouldn't expose his own glaring inadequacies. I swallowed my pride, bit back the stinging rebukes that threatened to erupt, and plastered on a professional smile. I meticulously documented everything, every instance of his incompetence, every stolen idea, every broken promise. I had to keep my composure because I knew that the game had just begun and I had to play along. They all reveled in my perceived defeat. My coworkers, once seemingly supportive, began to subtly distance themselves, sensing weakness, positioning themselves for the scraps they thought I'd leave behind. The whispers started, hushed conversations that ceased abruptly when I entered the room, sidelong glances that spoke volumes. They celebrated my humiliation. But they didn't know that they were not only stabbing me in the back, they were also fueling my resolve. I started coming in earlier and staying later, meticulously noting every instance of Thompson's incompetence and laziness, every deviation from company policy, every ethical breach. The person I trusted most, Sarah from accounting, the one I confided in over countless lunch breaks, the one who always seemed genuinely sympathetic to my frustrations, was one of them. The day they told me I wasn't ready, that's the day they signed their own destruction warrant. They broke me with that one word, adequate, but little did they know I was just getting started. For 5 years, I'd practically built that department with my bare hands, only to have Mr. Thompson, a walking definition of incompetence, take all the credit. He needed someone dynamic, he said, someone who could take charge. Someone, in other words, who wouldn't reveal his own glaring lack of ability. I smiled, nodded, and meticulously began documenting everything. And then I found out Sarah, my supposed friend, was one of them, whispering behind my back. The consequences were immediate and brutal. Suddenly my projects were lost, my emails went unanswered, and my presence in meetings became optional. I was effectively erased, relegated to the role of a ghost in the machine I had helped create. The sleepless nights began. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction, every slight, every stolen idea. The weight of injustice pressed down on me, a physical burden that made it hard to breathe. I tried to fix it, of course. I scheduled a meeting with Thompson, armed with data, charts, and irrefutable evidence of my contributions. I spoke calmly, professionally, laying out my case with the precision of a surgeon. He listened, his face an impassive mask, and then with a dismissive wave of his hand, he rejected everything. Ella, he said, his voice dripping with condescension, you're simply not a team player. You lack the vision to see the bigger picture. I walked out of that meeting feeling like I had been punched in the gut. The air seemed to thin, the walls seemed to close in. I had played by the rules, I had followed the process, and I had been utterly and completely defeated. The injustice of it all was overwhelming. I considered quitting, walking away from the whole mess and starting over somewhere new. But the thought of Thompson and his cronies celebrating my departure, reveling in their victory, was unbearable. I couldn't let them win, so I doubled down. I became a shadow, a silent observer, meticulously gathering information. I installed a hidden voice recorder on my desk, disguised as a pen holder, capturing every conversation, every meeting, every whispered aside. I learned their routines, their habits, their weaknesses. Thompson, I discovered, was having an affair with his secretary, using company funds to finance their rendezvous. Sarah was leaking confidential information to a competitor in exchange for a promised job offer. The others were engaged in various petty schemes, padding their expenses, stealing office supplies, and generally treating the company as their personal piggy bank. The more I learned, the angrier I became, but I kept my anger buried deep, hidden beneath a veneer of polite indifference. I smiled at them, I nodded at their jokes, I even offered to help them with their work, all the while knowing that I was collecting the ammunition I would eventually use to destroy them. The tension became almost unbearable. I felt like a coiled spring wound tighter and tighter with each passing day. I knew that I was approaching my breaking point, that I couldn't maintain this charade forever. I needed a plan, a strategy, a way to unleash my pent-up rage in a way that would not only punish them for their betrayal but also leave them utterly and completely ruined. The thought of their downfall consumed me. I spent hours poring over legal documents, searching for loopholes, looking for ways to turn their own actions against them. I consulted with friends who worked in law enforcement, asking them hypothetical questions about corporate misconduct and ethical violations. I even considered hiring a private investigator, but I realized that I couldn't trust anyone. This was a battle I had to fight on my own, using my own skills, my own resources, and my own cunning. It was a dangerous game, I knew, but I was willing to risk everything for the chance to exact my revenge. Because they had made one fatal mistake, they underestimated me. They thought I was weak, they thought I was defeated, but they were wrong. I was simply waiting for the right moment to strike. If you would give anything to protect your family, subscribe now and join a community where loyalty is everything. The day they truly broke me wasn't the day they stole my ideas or dismissed my contributions. It was the day they tried to destroy my reputation. A fabricated email purportedly from me was circulated among senior management, filled with crude insults aimed at Thompson and other executives. The language was vile, the accusations outlandish, and the intent was clear: to paint me as unstable, unprofessional, and utterly unfit for any position of responsibility. I was summoned to a disciplinary hearing, presented with the evidence, and given a chance to defend myself. But how do you defend yourself against something that never happened? How do you prove that you didn't write something when the digital fingerprints have been meticulously forged? I tried to explain, to reason, to plead my case, but my words fell on deaf ears. Thompson sat there, his face a mask of righteous indignation, feigning shock and disappointment. Sarah, my supposed friend, avoided my gaze, her silence a tacit admission of guilt. The others looked on with thinly veiled satisfaction, eager to witness my downfall. The hearing was a sham, a preordained execution disguised as due process. I was suspended without pay, pending a full investigation, which of course was never going to happen. I left the building feeling like I had been stripped naked and paraded through the streets. My career, my reputation, my livelihood all lay in ruins at their feet. I went home and locked myself in my apartment. The phone rang incessantly, but I ignored it. Emails flooded my inbox, but I didn't open them. I just sat there in the darkness, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of despair crushing me. The city lights outside seemed to mock my misery, their glittering promise of success a cruel reminder of everything I had lost. I thought about giving up, about walking away from it all, about finding some way to escape the pain. But then a flicker of defiance ignited within me. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to disappear. They wanted me to surrender, but I wouldn't let them. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I would fight back, not with anger or resentment, but with cold, calculated precision. I would use their own weapons against them. I would expose their lies, their deceit, their corruption. I would make them pay for what they had done. The transition wasn't immediate. It was a slow, gradual process of transforming from a victim into a planner. The first step was to accept the reality of my situation. I had been betrayed, I had been wronged, and I had been left for dead. But I was still alive, and as long as I was alive, there was still hope. I started by meticulously reviewing all the evidence against me, searching for inconsistencies, looking for clues that could lead me to the truth. I consulted with a computer forensics expert who confirmed my suspicions. The email was a forgery, meticulously crafted to implicate me. He was able to recover deleted files from my computer, files that proved I had been working on a confidential project that Thompson had stolen and presented as his own. The evidence was mounting, slowly but surely. I began to construct a meticulous plan, a strategy for exposing their crimes and bringing them to justice. I knew that it wouldn't be easy. They were powerful, they were well-connected, and they would stop at nothing to protect themselves. But I was determined to succeed. I would use their arrogance against them, their belief that they were untouchable. I would lure them into a trap, and then I would spring it with devastating force. The days that followed were a blur of activity. I worked tirelessly, gathering information, documenting evidence, and refining my plan. I slept little, ate less, and barely spoke to anyone. I was consumed by my mission, driven by a burning desire for revenge. The world outside my apartment faded away, replaced by a single, unwavering focus: to destroy those who had tried to destroy me. The absolute lowest point came one rainy afternoon, mirroring that first day of realization. My bank account was dwindling, the severance package a cruel joke, and the whispers in the industry had already poisoned any chance of finding new employment. I sat on the floor, surrounded by stacks of documents, the weight of the task ahead crushing me. A single tear traced a path down my cheek, a testament to the despair that threatened to consume me. I almost gave up then, almost succumbed to the darkness. But then I saw it, a small framed photo on my desk. My family smiling proud, the people who had sacrificed everything for me, who believed in me even when I doubted myself. I couldn't let them down, I wouldn't let them see me defeated. That photo was the spark, the ember that reignited my resolve. I wiped away the tears, stood up, and took a deep breath. The fear didn't disappear, but it was overshadowed by a cold, unwavering determination. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore, I was fighting for them. From that moment on, the game changed. I stopped reacting and started acting. I embraced the shadows, becoming a ghost in their machine, observing, planning, and preparing. The fake email, the stolen credit, the whispering, it was all going to come back on them 1,000-fold. They thought they had won, they thought they had silenced me, but they were wrong, dead wrong. The day they left me bleeding, I decided to become a ghost. I smiled at Thompson. I even complimented Sarah on her new purse, a ridiculously overpriced designer bag I knew she couldn't afford on her salary, but inside I was ice. My apartment transformed into a war room. The hidden recorder, disguised as a pen holder, became my most trusted ally. Every whispered conversation, every snide remark, every unethical decision was meticulously captured, transcribed, and cataloged. I spent hours poring over legal databases, researching corporate fraud, defamation, and breach of contract. I learned the intricacies of digital forensics, the legal standards for admissible evidence, and the subtle art of crafting an anonymous tip that would trigger a full-blown investigation. I knew I couldn't afford any mistakes. One slip-up, one miscalculation, and I would be the one facing legal consequences. The closest call came during one late night as I was downloading security footage from the company server. Thompson, fueled by his ego, had chosen a laughably simple password, a variation of his own name and birth date. I used a VPN, bouncing my signal through multiple countries to mask my location, but the sheer volume of data I was transferring risked detection. Just as the download reached 99%, the IT director, a nervous, weaselly man named David, appeared in the server room. He claimed he was checking for routine maintenance, but I saw the suspicion in his eyes. My heart hammered against my ribs. I slammed my laptop shut, disconnecting the external hard drive in a split second. I feigned surprise, pretending I was just catching up on work emails. David hovered for a few minutes, making small talk, his gaze darting around the room. I matched his casual tone, cracking a joke about Thompson's latest blunder. Finally, he left, muttering something about needing more coffee. I waited another hour before resuming the download, my hands shaking. The security footage was crucial. It showed Thompson using company funds to pay for his mistress's lavish vacations, Sarah meeting with a representative from a rival company, and several other employees engaging in petty theft. But more importantly, it captured the moment they fabricated the email that ruined my reputation. I needed concrete evidence to prove my innocence and expose their treachery. The local library became my second office. I devoured books on psychology, studying the art of manipulation and persuasion. I needed to understand their weaknesses, their motivations, their deepest fears. Thompson was driven by his insatiable ego and his fear of being exposed as a fraud. Sarah craved validation and was willing to betray anyone for a taste of success. The others were motivated by greed and a sense of entitlement. I crafted separate plans for each of them, targeting their individual vulnerabilities. For Thompson, I decided to leak the evidence of his affair to his wife, a formidable woman with a sharp mind and a ruthless streak. I knew she would make his life a living nightmare, both personally and professionally. For Sarah, I anonymously notified the rival company about her disloyalty, ensuring that she would never receive the promised job offer. For the others, I compiled a detailed report of their petty crimes and submitted it to the company's ethics hotline. The anticipation was almost unbearable. I felt like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of destruction, each note carefully planned and precisely executed. I knew that the fallout would be explosive, that their lives would be irrevocably changed. But I didn't care. They had shown me no mercy, and I would show them none. The week before my planned expose, I started feeling paranoid. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every phone call felt like a trap. I began to question my sanity, wondering if I was becoming as twisted and vindictive as they were. But then I would remember the look on Thompson's face when he fired me, the smug satisfaction in Sarah's eyes, the casual cruelty of the others, and my resolve would harden once again. I made sure that every detail was in place. Time-stamped copies of all documents stored off-site, anonymous email addresses prepared, and trusted contacts outside the company were on standby to ensure that the evidence saw the light of day no matter what. My strike date was set. The day that they tried to completely bury me, I was ready to reveal the truth. Don't miss out. Subscribe for more revenge stories. I found their weakness in a forgotten file, buried deep within the company's archives. The original business plan for a project I had spearheaded years ago, the project they had stolen and claimed as their own. But this wasn't just a duplicate. It was the original, complete with handwritten notes, early drafts, and most importantly, signed affidavits from several key stakeholders attesting to my leadership. This document was irrefutable proof of their fraud, a smoking gun that could blow their entire house of cards down. But I couldn't just release it anonymously. It needed to be presented in a way that would maximize the impact, that would expose their lies to the widest possible audience. I decided to leverage the company's annual shareholders meeting, a meticulously orchestrated PR event designed to showcase their success and project an image of flawless competence. I knew that Thompson, as CEO, would be the keynote speaker, basking in the adulation of the investors and the media. That's where I would strike. I spent days crafting an anonymous email to several major news outlets, hinting at potential financial irregularities within the company and promising to provide irrefutable evidence at the upcoming shareholders' meeting. I knew that the media vultures would be circling, eager for a scoop that could make their careers. I created a fake press badge, using my old company photo and a generic name, knowing that security would be lax amidst the carefully controlled chaos. I also enlisted the help of a former colleague, a disgruntled programmer who had been passed over for promotion one too many times. He agreed to help me hack into the company's presentation system, replacing Thompson's carefully crafted slideshow with my own damning evidence. The plan was audacious, risky, and utterly dependent on perfect execution. But I was confident that I could pull it off. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, anticipating every possible contingency and rehearsing my every move. The day of the shareholders' meeting dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I dressed in a nondescript suit, hoping to blend in with the crowd. As I approached the entrance to the auditorium, my heart pounded in my chest. This was it, the moment of truth. I flashed my fake press badge at the security guard, offering a confident smile and a mumbled excuse about needing to set up my equipment. He waved me through without a second glance. I was in. The auditorium was already packed, filled with investors, analysts, and reporters, all buzzing with anticipation. I found a seat near the back, trying to remain inconspicuous. On stage, Thompson was holding court, shaking hands and flashing his trademark grin. Sarah stood beside him, looking radiant in a designer dress, her eyes scanning the crowd for potential admirers. The meeting began with a series of dry financial reports, each one carefully designed to paint a rosy picture of the company's performance. The audience listened politely, nodding along as Thompson rattled off impressive statistics and projected optimistic forecasts. Then it was his turn to speak. He strode confidently to the podium, his eyes gleaming with self-satisfaction. He launched into his prepared speech, praising his leadership, touting the company's innovation, and promising even greater success in the years to come. But as he reached the crescendo of his self-congratulatory address, something unexpected happened. The lights flickered. The screen behind him went blank. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Thompson paused, his face a mask of confusion. "What's going on?" he barked into the microphone, and then the screen came back to life. But instead of Thompson's PowerPoint presentation, it displayed a single stark image, the original business plan, complete with my name emblazoned across the top. A hush fell over the auditorium. Thompson stared at the screen, his face paling. I could see the sweat forming on his brow. He knew that his carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. Then the next slide appeared. A side-by-side comparison of my original plan and Thompson's presentation, highlighting the blatant plagiarism. The next slide revealed the signed affidavits from the key stakeholders, attesting to my authorship. And then the final slide, a montage of security footage, emails, and financial records, documenting their every crime, their every lie, their every betrayal. The auditorium erupted in chaos. Investors screamed, reporters scrambled for their phones, and Thompson stood frozen at the podium, his career collapsing around him. Sarah tried to run, but security guards blocked the exits. The police arrived, sirens blaring, ready to arrest the perpetrators of what was now a full-blown corporate scandal. I watched the scene unfold, a sense of cold satisfaction washing over me. My revenge was complete, but as I turned to leave, a hand grabbed my arm. It was David, the IT director, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "I knew it was you," he hissed. "You're going to pay for this." The police sirens wailed louder, and for a split second I felt a flicker of doubt. But then I looked back at the stage and saw the utter ruin I had wrought. It was worth it. The IT director's grip tightened, his face contorted with fury. "You think you've won? This isn't over." I met his gaze, a flicker of pity crossing my face. David was a pawn, a casualty of their ambition. "It is for me," I said, my voice barely a whisper above the din of the chaos. I gently disengaged his hand and turned to walk away, melting into the throng of bewildered and enraged investors. The auditorium doors swung shut behind me, sealing off the pandemonium. As I stepped out into the sunlight, the fresh air filled my lungs, a stark contrast to the stale, manufactured atmosphere I had just left behind. News alerts were already lighting up my phone. "Corporate scandal rocks company name," one headline screamed. "CEO accused of fraud, plagiarism," read another. The story was exploding, spreading like wildfire across the internet. I hailed a cab, giving the driver my address. As we pulled away from the curb, I glanced back at the building, now surrounded by news vans and flashing police lights. The faces of Thompson, Sarah, and the others flashed in my mind, their expressions a mixture of shock, fear, and disbelief. Their untouchable world had crumbled, their carefully constructed lies exposed for all to see. The following days were a whirlwind. Thompson was swiftly removed from his position, his reputation in tatters. Sarah was blacklisted from the industry, her dreams of climbing the corporate ladder reduced to ashes. The others faced investigations, potential lawsuits, and the scorn of their colleagues and peers. The company's stock plummeted, investors lost millions, and the One Sprout organization was teetering on the brink of collapse. I watched it all unfold from the relative anonymity of my apartment, a strange mix of satisfaction and exhaustion washing over me. The phone rang. It was a reporter from a major news outlet, eager to get my side of the story. I declined politely but firmly. I had achieved my goal. I didn't need the attention, the fame, or the validation. My revenge was complete. A week later, I received a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked envelope. Inside, I found a single sheet of paper. On it, a handwritten note, "Thank you." It was signed by a name I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was from. It was from one of the many victims of their greed, their lies, and their cruelty. It was a reminder that my actions had not only brought justice to those who wronged me, but had also helped countless others. The silence in my apartment was deafening. The weight of the past few months lifted, replaced by an unsettling emptiness. I had spent so long consumed by revenge that I had forgotten what it felt like to simply be. I looked around my apartment at the stacks of documents, the hidden recorder, the makeshift war room that had been my sanctuary and my prison. It was time to dismantle it all, to put the past behind me and to move on. I carefully packed away the evidence, storing it in a secure location just in case. I erased the digital files, shredded the documents, and dismantled the surveillance equipment. I scrubbed the apartment clean, removing every trace of my obsession. As I sat on the floor, surrounded by empty boxes, a wave of emotion washed over me. Relief, sadness, anger, and finally acceptance. I had survived, I had fought back, and I had won. The phone rang again. This time it was my mother. "I saw the news," she said, her voice trembling. "Are you okay?" I took a deep breath and smiled. "I'm better than okay, Mom," I said. "I'm free." I spent the next few months reconnecting with my family, rebuilding my life, and rediscovering my passions. I started a new business, focusing on ethical and sustainable practices. I became an advocate for corporate transparency and accountability. I used my experience to help others who had been wronged, offering them guidance, support, and hope. I learned that revenge, while satisfying in the moment, is not a sustainable solution. It's a temporary fix that can leave you feeling empty and hollow. True healing comes from forgiveness, from letting go of the past, and from focusing on creating a better future. David, the IT director, faded into obscurity. Thompson's wife divorced him and, taking half of his assets, began funding charities focused on ethics in business. Sarah was last seen working at a discount department store, a far cry from the corner office she craved. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet, it's necessary. It's a primal instinct, a desperate attempt to restore balance to a world that has been tipped on its axis. It's a dangerous path, one that can consume you if you're not careful. But sometimes it's the only way to right a wrong, to expose the truth, and to reclaim your life. It was my only way. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.